so we have this for future reference. Hi, everybody. It's great to see you all. I think that some of you know who I am. Some of you I've never had the privilege of meeting. I'm Nancy Karabjanian. I'm the director of the Center for Political Communication, but I also teach in the broadcast journalism program, the two courses, COM 329 and 326, on broadcast writing and broadcast production. I've had some of you in my classes, and I've had two of our guests today in my classes. And I also worked with Tom Byrne for many, many years. I was a working journalist for 30 years. So I've been out in the trenches, as has Tom, and he's still at it. So there's a lot to talk about. I'm going to introduce them to you real quick and then start us off with the first question. So Tom, if you would wave, that's Tom Byrne. He is the news director at Delaware Public Media, which is Delaware's NPR station. Interesting note, Delaware was the last state in the union to get an NPR station. And some of you, including Rachel Sawicki and Jake Savage, have actually worked with Tom at Delaware Public Media. Brandon Holveck is, wave to us there, Brandon. Brandon is a recent graduate just last year from the University of Delaware, but before he picked up his diploma, he picked up a paycheck from the News Journal. So he is still working for Delawareonline and the News Journal right now, covering the pandemic. And Kelsey Kushner. Kelsey, give us a big wave. Kelsey is a class of 16 graduate of the University of Delaware, and she is on her third stop as a professional working in television. So we have Tom with TV experience and radio experience, Brandon with print experience, but also radio experience at WVUD and also TV experience at 326. And Kelsey is joining us, and she has all the TV experience right now working for an O&O, which means owned and operated CBS station in Baltimore. I'll tell you this, it's the station that gave us Oprah. So I'm going to get it started by first going to Tom. Tom, this has to be really hard to cover a story like this that seems to be changing so much, but that the stories all feel the same. How hard is it?
Well, I think the biggest thing I could say, like from like the first month or so, was that it was, to me, I described it to people as literally like election day or the final day of the legislative session every day for a month, where it was just nonstop, constantly working, constantly trying to keep up with things. It was exhausting, to say the least. I think, the only good thing is I think during that month, kind of got practiced at handling things as they came at you, how to deal with staff, how to kind of allocate your resources properly, and just try to find some ways to create some muscle memory in terms of how you handle things to make things a little bit easier. And I think since then, we've gotten a little better at it. It's incredibly difficult just because even on days where you kind of walk into the day and you're thinking, okay, you know what, we know what today kind of holds. We kind of have a sense of where we're going. Those days don't usually hold, and if they do hold, they're few and far between. I mean, it's you just have to kind of roll with the punches, and it's something you've always had to do as a journalist, but it's just been much more intense. So yeah, it's been a lot, and I'm glad I have a great staff, and they've done a terrific job of just kind of adapting and working things out on the fly and being flexible and adaptable. That's probably the biggest thing. You just have.
Kelsey, you looked very pensive as Tom was saying that. I assume this is the same situation for you.
Yeah, it's weird. I'm not even gonna lie. It's very weird for us. They shut down our CBS because CBS New York had someone who got diagnosed with coronavirus very early on. So they shut down all of our O&Os, or all of the O&Os. So we were out like before it was, not to say before it was a big thing, but like before it really blew up, because they wanted to keep our stations like clean, because they thought Norah O'Donnell was suddenly going to be broadcasting from Baltimore. So we were all kicked out. They brought in like porta potties they put in the parking lot. They assigned us with one like I'm with the same photographer, which I'm happy that we get along, because I know there's some people who just don't get along. But yeah, I mean, it's the same story every single day, but you have to find like a new angle or a new way to make people care. Otherwise it's just like, I mean, it gets tiring as a journalist talking about the same thing, but you know that like it's something it's important to talk about, but you just have to find a way to make it so that way people care. And then it's also the weird thing now is like you can't talk to people. There's not that many people that are out. You can go to the grocery store, but as a reporter, you get up close and personal with the people you talk to. You want to like form that bond. You want to talk to them. You want them to trust you and to talk to you and open up to you. But when you have a microphone that's 6 feet away and you're both wearing masks, like, sorry, can you say that again? I can't hear you. It just totally breaks that bond. So it's just a very weird transition. You have to figure out how you can still like make people want to talk to you, come up with creative story ideas, and like tell a story that'll make people, you know, want to pay attention and listen and trust what you're saying. So
Brandon, it's different in print, right? You guys are having a bit of a different experience.
Yeah, I think some of that holds as far as not being able to go out and just talk to regular people like you normally would. And that has also made the story development, finding those new angles, more difficult, because at least I'm not having as many conversations just casually with people, not necessarily record or out interviews, but just conversations about things that are happening. I'm at home. So if I'm not on the phone with them, I'm not seeing the same number of people and talking to them as I typically would be. So the challenge is kind of keeping up. Our kind of advantage is that as soon as we get news that we're shut down or this is reopened or that's reopened, it's like, get that out. We can put that out right away and then kind of talk about what the ramifications of that are going to be. But at first it was very much like, what's open, what's closed, where can people go? Let's make sure this information is available. Then it kind of slowed down in the middle. And now it's very much, okay, when is things going to reopen? What's open right now? When will it be open? And if you violate this or that, what's going to happen to you?
You know, so I've put out the first question. I want to let our three guests know that several of the people in the boxes here were working in 326 this past semester or 329. And I had no expectation for what they would be able to produce. You would not believe, and I've shared some of the audio stories with Tom. I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to them, but some of those stories are amazing.
Yeah, we're going to air a couple of them this week, just so people know.
Oh, good. Let me know, and I will let them know.
Yeah, there's some great pieces. So to those of you who did that work, I listened to a bunch of them that Nancy sent me, and I'm impressed because I know from what our staff is going through how difficult it is to work remotely and piece stories together sometimes. So the fact that you guys were able to, while taking classes, pull together stories that were interesting content-wise and really, well produced, considering the circumstances. You're to be commended for that.
I'm going to let Rachel now moderate. I'm going to leave my computer. I have to prep for a 1:30. So I hate to abandon all of you, but I'm recording, so I'm going to watch it later. But thank you to Kelsey, to Brandon, and to Tom for doing this. This was Tom's idea, and it turned into something truly that I think you guys will benefit from. The value of this is that you guys ask them questions. It is a Q&A with the pros. So, either Rachel, if you want to open up your chat side, and if they raise their hand, call on people, or, actually text Rachel, I have a question, or text your question. Thank you guys so much. And I miss you guys. I miss seeing you guys even on Zoom, and it's only been a week. So
wait, really quickly, do you know that every time when someone asks me why I got into like journalism, like, oh, well, I had this one class and I came over to you in the beginning of class. I was like, this class gives me anxiety. I don't want to do this. I don't like public speaking. I'm freaking out about MMJing. I don't want to do this. And that and my teacher was like, okay, well, you got to take this class if you want to get through journalism. And I'm like, and you helped me. You guided me through my anxiety. I'm like, I would not be here if it wasn't for your class. 100%.
Oh, thank you.
I tell that to everybody that asks me how or why I got started in this.
That is lovely to
You had
hear.
anxiety.
Some of these faces are people that I have worked with, at least in the one class, and I'm looking forward to working with them moving forward. And, you know, I've been sharing Brandon's front page bylines like a proud mother, although I have nothing to do with his front page byline. So, and I check in on you as much as I can, Kelsey. In fact, Kelsey has quite the history. So let me just tell you 3 things I know she's covered that I think you might want to talk to her about. She's covered 2 hurricanes. 2 hurricanes. She's only a graduate as of 2016. And she also covered Parkland. And I think that had to be quite the experience for such a young reporter. It would be an experience for a reporter of any age, but she was in Florida at the time on the front line of that. So Tom has been in the business, sorry, Tom, forever. And Brandon is one of the shining stars of the J program, in that when he was here, he wrote the article that got national attention about UD's volleyball coaches. And it's a story that just keeps on giving a little bit there, doesn't it, Brandon? But perhaps not in the best way. So please ask them your questions, go for it. And thank you so much for taking the time today. I'm keeping my computer on so that you guys I can continue to get the video. Don't look at my house.
I knew. Okay, so I guess I'll start. If anybody has a question, you can text me or you can put it in the chat. If there's like a specific one that you want to ask a specific person, just let me know. So I don't know, does anybody have a question that they want to ask now?
Yeah, I think I have a question I'd like to ask now.
All right, go ahead.
This is just a general question for all the reporters. My name is Joe Stamarca, by the way, the senior reporter at The Review and soon to be graduate class of 2020. So I just wanted to ask, how difficult do you think it is for students that are graduating now in 2020 to break into the field of journalism with coronavirus impacting many businesses and the economy and whatnot?
Who wants to go first?
Well, I mean, I could say, I mean,
We can start with Tom.
as a news director, yeah, I do hiring. So, I mean, I do know, I mean, it's the biggest problem you're going to have is uncertainty. Even outlets that want to hire are probably going to be a little tentative at this point, just because they just don't know. I mean, and that goes kind of across the board. I can speak from the public media kind of realm, which is a little bit different than the commercial realm. But even on our end, I mean, we're looking, we have multiple funding streams, and kind of the way we've built our budget is to try to have multiple funding streams so that if one were to go down for some reason, there were other ones to rely on. Well, in a pandemic like this, where everything shuts down, all of your revenue streams become kind of shaky and uncertain. And so, while we're in, good shape for now, yeah, it would be hard for me to conceive going to, my board and our president and saying, hey, I want to hire like 2 people right now, beyond maybe like hiring people part-time. And that maybe, I would think maybe the best bet short-term for reporters coming out of school is to see what opportunities might be there part-time to get your foot in the door somewhere. Because I think some places may be more willing to say, okay, we can bring someone on for a finite period of time, or knowing that the job is only going to last as long as we can afford to pay for it, which for you as someone looking for a job is not great, but that may be, from where I'm standing, the most likely prospects short term.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Sure.
Kelsey, do you want to go next?
Well, I guess that pretty much sums it, because I wouldn't be hiring. If I was in your position, I think what I would do would be, I feel like a lot of this industry is like, it's like who you know. So if you have someone who might be, in the field already, like I would be emailing them like, hey, just, if anyone's hiring, and just trying to like reach out as much as I can. I kind of feel like during times like this, what I found, like whenever you're covering, like whether it's a hurricane or like a pandemic, it's when like journalism matters most. So people might be willing to kind of, But then again, I don't know, because Tom just said that, you know, hiring might be difficult right now, but maybe, you know, you could try to find a way to like wiggle your way in, whether you know somebody in the industry who might be able to help pull you up and just, or maybe like, what if you like start like a blog? You could maybe start just writing your own about, you know, going out and finding stories with people. You know, like I go out and I interviewed a woman the other day who got groceries delivered because she has a heart condition, and her neighbor brought her groceries or brings her groceries every Thursday. And like, that's a cute story. So like maybe like start something, type it up, and then just start sending your work around being like, hey, I don't know, I can, if you're hiring, like, you know, might be a way to try to like get a little bit of experience, because I know a lot of times you kind of hit that problem where, news directors like, well, I'm looking for somebody who has 2 years experience. And like, all right, well, I don't have any, and I need you to give me that experience. So I don't know, like, I guess Tom kind of knows better than I would when it comes to trying to get a job, and if people are hiring during a time like this. But I would just try to go out and make sure that I'm seen. Like, I want you to know that I want a job. I'm working towards it. What can I do? You know, I'll take a pay cut, whatever you need. That kind of doesn't really help your question at all. Sorry.
Oh, it does. Thank you so much for that.
I would agree with that. I think, you know, having like samples of your work from classes at school and like from the review and things like that are definitely going to be helpful. And everyone should make a LinkedIn also. I'm just going to plug that real quick.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. Yes. Okay, before we get to Jake's question, I want to ask a couple other things that are pandemic related. I want to know what you guys think about how the workplace and the newsroom dynamic has changed. I know Brandon and I have kind of talked about this a little bit, like the way that you guys do like pitching now, and just how do you think that the dynamic is different now, and what's going to become of it down the road as well? Like, how do you think this is going to change the way we do journalism, if at all? Brandon, you're muted. Brandon, you're muted.
Oh, all right. Sorry.
There you go.
I was just saying how I said to step away a second because that was my editor on the phone. So that's the first thing that's kind of changed, is a lot more phone calls. Anytime that it's kind of somebody important like that, I'm on it right away. And we're kind of not talking for 20, 25 minutes. It's just a couple back and forth. Hey, we need to fix this or approach that. So yeah, things have completely changed at the News Journal. We're all working remotely. It has been a challenge in some ways, but I think at this point we're kind of used to it. It's been since I think 3 or 4 days after the first case in Delaware was announced. So that was the middle of March that we've been remote. It's about 2 months now. And it will be this way, they've said, until August, September, maybe even longer than that. And the keys are kind of just being in constant contact. Reporters, especially print reporters, can kind of work independently on a regular day-to-day basis, but you kind of will forget until you're remote how often you're asking somebody for a phone number or bouncing an idea off of somebody, even though you might not be working on the same story together. So at times you're off on your own, but you do miss a little bit of that community in the newsroom. And the key, I think, when doing it remotely is to be on the phone, is to be talking to everybody. We use Microsoft Teams, so chatting through that too, just to continue to try to bounce those ideas off of each other, because that's really where story ideas can grow and get a lot stronger.
Do you?
I was going to say, I think, we're kind of the same, but we're working remotely because we're radio. Basically, at this point, the only people who are here at our studio every day are our 2 anchors, our morning anchor and our afternoon anchor. They're the only ones who really show up every single day here at our studio. I come down 1 or 2 days a week to work on our weekly show. The rest of the staff is remote. We work. We have been working largely through Slack anyway. So in kind of the process, it hasn't changed a whole lot, just because the way our staff is set up, the morning anchor's in hours that barely overlap with the afternoon anchor. my hours are all over the place. Depending on one of our other reporters, depending whether they're covering stuff day side or night side, we didn't really have a lot of times where we were all physically in the same space anyway. So that part of it hasn't been terribly different for us. What's different is, you're a lot of days just kind of riding the wave of that day. And so you're trying to figure out, okay, how can I support somebody else? If someone's having problems getting an interview, they're having a technical issue working from home, can someone else, while they're working on their own story, help that person get what they need audio-wise to create a story for radio? I mean, a lot of it is just trying to find ways to support each other as you're working throughout the day, because it really does kind of change from day to day what hours people are working, what they're covering, and that's kind of been my biggest thing with our staff is like, well, look, just be ready to help anyone you can who needs that extra help kind of getting a story to the finish line, because it can be challenging depending on how you're set up at home and what you're going to accomplish at any given moment. If you're trying to get 2 interviews and they both want to talk to you at 2 o'clock, we've got to be okay. Someone's just got to help this person out as best you can.
Did anyone else have anything to add to that, or do we want to move on to the next question?
I just say that in the newsroom, we have a very strong assignment desk. So when it comes to like pitching stories, half the time I go to work, they already have a story set up for me. So, and at times that's great, because they're like, okay, you have your interview at 3:30 and you're going to do this Zoom interview. Then half the time I don't even have to leave my house because they have it all set up for me, which is fine. But it's also, it poses a challenge, because like if there's so many good stories out there, there's so many people who are going through this and who like reach out to you. So if I've been ripping apart this one nursing home that has not been providing adequate care at all for their people, and they currently have like the highest number of deaths inside their nursing home because their doctor left. It's a whole thing. So it's been something I found I have enjoyed, reaching out to families through Facebook. Facebook has been key, because a lot of people will post about stuff now. So I'm going on Facebook, typing up Pleasant View Nursing Home, getting connected with like 5 families who just lost family members. And then I'm able to share their story and talk to them about it, and then hold on to their contact. So later down the road, if I need to do another story, I've created a comfortable relationship with the woman, who just lost her dad, that I can text her and be like, hey, how are you? This is what I'm doing. Do you know anybody? And then from there, it's just been able to grow. So, that's kind of how our like dynamic has changed in the newsroom, is like, we don't go into the building. We don't really communicate with anybody. It's more just like, here's your story, do your thing, but then maybe like try to find another way. It's forcing us to try to find our own stories, which is great when every day the story's pretty much put together for us.
Yeah, maybe going off of that.
I would say,
go ahead, Tom.
I was going to say, Kelsey's really right about making those contacts and keeping those contacts, because in this realm, a lot of these stories, not just like the one that Kelsey's talking about with the nursing home, there's a lot of stories that you're going to wind up circling back to anyway. And so having established contacts with people and having them already come talking to you is a really big deal. I mean, just, for instance, we did a big story when a lot of the houses of worship went online with services. So we had talked to a number of different, pastors and rabbis for that story. And so when the governor came back and said, okay, we're going to allow House of Worship to open up with 20 to 30% capacity and such, we already had a ready list of people who were ready to, we had already talked to, were already comfortable talking to our report. And so we were able to kind of turn the story a lot more easily. So having those, realizing that a lot of these stories you're going to wind up circling back to at some point, it's important to kind of make sure you kind of even just in between touch base with some of those contacts and make sure like they're comfortable still talking to you and having them ready.
Yeah, going off that, another question someone had, what are some ways to keep the content, and we talked a little bit about this earlier too, how to keep things fresh, how to keep things new, and what are some of the ways that you guys have been looking for new content and new stories during all of this? Whoever wants to.
I don't know if there's like I don't know how to, I don't know who talks first. Does anyone else want to talk? I can go again.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's a challenge to try to like make things interesting. I think I kind of mentioned that in the beginning, like, cause there's some days, I mean, we have like 19 reporters. So total, we have so many people that work for us, and they all, like, everybody needs a story. And so it's really hard. And it's actually fascinating sometimes to watch and listen to like what people come up with that doesn't necessarily overlap. Of course, you're going to have some stories that do overlap. But every day, I mean, numbers are changing. Every day the numbers change. So there's something, boom, right there. You've got new numbers, you have new deaths, you have new cases, that you have new people that have been removed from the hospital, something like there's something to talk about. But you just have to find like a way to like, you know, to get a new angle. So like yesterday, the mayor of Baltimore announced that he needs more testing. Okay, well, how many tests are we supposed to be doing a day? The CDC says 2,700. You can ask the mayor, how many tests are we doing? Only 500. Story right there. You can wrap an entire story about the fact that Baltimore doesn't have enough tests. And so you just sometimes have to like find a different angle. God, I don't know, in the bigger story, because there's a lot there. You just kind of have to like look for it. And you do that by talking to people. Like you have to talk to people to get out there, you know, hear other stories, because then maybe there's another story idea that comes from there. And then you can kind of fresh up whatever you've been working on, or whatever, you know, the latest data is. But there are so many times, I won't even sugarcoat it, that like I've done a story nightside that someone did during like the 6 o'clock news. I'm like, this is no different. And I would be angry if I was the person during the day who did the story, because I'm pretty much just rewriting whatever you just did. And so then it's on me to try to find something new to talk about, which some days maybe there just isn't. So it's definitely like, it's not easy. I'm not going to say like, oh, it's easy to find new stories during the pandemic when we're like 57 days into it, because it's not easy. You just have to try to find a new way to tell the same story over and over.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. Like that's the single biggest challenge that we face right now. And sort of going off of that, we've started to get outside of coronavirus coverage a little bit too. I think there's an appetite in our audience for something else. I think that people who have read our updates every day, and we keep those coming, but they're looking for something else that's interesting, and it's still stuff that has newsworthiness, not just, you know, a fluffy throwaway piece. Like we're publishing some really deep investigative stories about other topics. We had a look back this week, for instance, in this prison riot from 2017, a big investigation that one of our reporters and a couple of our visual people had been working on for months. And we still kind of said, you know, I think there are going to be enough people out here who want to read something else and experience something else. So that's another thing too, is that the vast majority of what I'm covering is the coronavirus, but there's still room to find other interesting stories.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, we've done the same thing. I think part of it is trying to find things that aren't coronavirus related where you can. And for us, a lot of it can be, you know, much like the News Journal's piece on the prison, it was something that they had already been working on, something that's kind of going back to a story and kind of taking a fresh look or updating what's going on with the story. You know, we did the same thing this past week. You know, we had a contributor who had been following kind of this historic preservation battle in Newcastle County, Delaware, and they had finally kind of gotten around having the meeting that was going to start kind of solving this one particular problem, but also looking at some possible ordinances moving forward. And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Like it's, you know, it's timely because of what's going on with the meeting. And I was, you know, pleasantly surprised that we got a lot of web traffic on it. And I think it's part of what, you know, Brandon was saying, was that I think there is a bit of like coronavirus fatigue. And so if you have a really good story that's outside of the coronavirus realm, is newsworthy, if people are interested in that, because it does give them a little bit of a respite from that kind of drumbeat of as Kelsey and Brandon were saying, the same things over and over, just kind of slightly repackaged or slightly updated. So yeah, I think that's part of it too, is not to become like completely tunnel vision on coronavirus, and realize that there are some other stories out there that are worth telling, and that there is an appetite for them.
And one other, oh my gosh, we got a lot of questions coming in. Okay. Last one in here that's kind of coronavirus related, and then we can move on to a couple other general things. Sam Ford is our visual editor. Sam, do you want to just go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, sure. Hi, as said, I'm Sam Ford. I'm one of the visual editors for the review. And my question was, how has the coronavirus impacted obtaining visuals for articles? And how, also in addition with that, how reporters now have to interact with photographers and illustrators?
I can go first on this one. We still have photographers and videographers out in the field. They're taking a lot of precautions. They have protective equipment, and they're a distance most of the time from their subjects. The communications changed a little bit between reporters and photographers. I'm less likely to be out there with a photographer than I was before. Like if we can send one person to do what maybe two people used to do, we're going to try to do that. There's also stories that I've done recently that, I've used visuals that I've gotten from sources, but we've also integrated like more kind of just static, like buildings and that types of things that, don't necessarily require like arranging a whole meetup with sources. So it's still just as important as it was before. And our photographers have done an excellent job. They're still out there doing what we typically ask them of for our print product.
I'd say that's probably the same for us, except we don't have, we're a union station, so we have to work with the photographer. Our reporters do. Like, I'm not allowed to touch camera gear, which is a blessing and a curse sometimes. But so for us, it's changed that like I probably should put a pillow in my car because I live there. I am always out with my photographer on the scene, whether it's like we're outside Johns Hopkins or we're, I don't even know where it was, City Hall yesterday. We're still out there. We are still out there, like interviewing, the mayor, talking to people. And so that allows us to get visuals, like video for the story and pictures for the web and stuff, which is great. Because I actually really thought it was going to get to a point where, the photographers are sent out and then they come over to our house, drop in the clip and then leave. And then it was up to me to like figure out how to run my own live shot. But it hasn't gotten to that point. It's just been very different because now we're stuck with not stuck, but we work with the same person every single day. So, like my photographer is named CJ. So like, I know how he works. He knows how I work. So if I'm writing a story, he can go get visuals for it. So it's been working. But, typically I would be riding with him in the car, driving to do this story. I'd be typing, he'd get us to the location, shoot it. Then we'd put the story together. Now it's like, I drive separate in my own car. I work in my own car on my own laptop, which is kind of just how it's changed, but we're still able to gather everything for the story.
And from our perspective, it's kind of the opposite. We're a small station, so we pretty much rely on our reporters to handle our visuals. Just we don't have a photography staff, or we're not a union shop where we have to work with someone on that side of things. And a lot of it, I mean, to be honest with you, is as Brandon said, is like, we probably don't do as much kind of close-in detail photography work. A lot of times, I jokingly call them photo safaris. I just kind of go out and be like, okay, what are some of the stories we've been working on, or we know we're going to be working on, and try to kind of find visuals that we know are either linked to a specific story or to a specific kind of genre of story that we're doing, so that we have a little bit something to work with, instead of just kind of keep falling back on the same stuff. So yeah, a lot of times I'll be honest with you, when I do the weekly show, I have like multiple stories that require a little bit more art to them. And usually my Friday mornings are spent going on these like photo safaris and trying to be like, okay, what do I need for this story? What do I need for this story? And just hopping in my car and driving around. And again, as everyone was saying, just kind of being socially distant, and trying to be safe and getting what we need. But it's definitely a little bit more bare bones than what maybe we would have done in the past.
Thank you all very much.
All right, so Jake wants to know how everyone got started in their fields and what was maybe like the first job or the first internship you had that kind of sparked your interest in journalism. And then maybe going off of that, maybe if you could offer any input on internships in general at this time also, that might be a helpful thing, because I know a lot of people are kind of searching for internships right now, and a lot of places are kind of cutting back on that. So who wants to go first?
Internships saved my life. So when I was in my senior year at UD, I decided to sign up for like the Fox 29 internship. So that was the first one that I had, and it was great. They didn't put me on the morning show at first. First, they were going to have me do their night show. Thank God they switched me to mornings, because I worked with like Mike Jarek, who is a legend over there, crazy, but a legend. I worked with like some of the best people who then I would use all of like the resources they had there. So every time the morning show was over, I would go downstairs, I would sit at the desk, I would not make them because they were happy to do it. Like restart the show from the beginning, and I would practice. I would learn how to read. I'd have Mike Jarrett come down and like teach me how to do my voice and what words to emphasize and whatnot. So I spent so much time doing that when my internship was over, I stayed on as like an extra, I don't know, a second year intern. So I spent, and then I also, like, from working at Fox 29, I met a lot of people. Like, you meet everybody because they have their morning show, so they bring in people. And again, it is so important. Every time you meet somebody, save their card, get their number, get their email, whatever it is, I don't care, get it, hold on to it, and then follow up. Because I met people for the 76ers, and I'm like, oh, would love to work for the Sixers. So then I worked for my senior year at UD. I worked as a Sixers PR intern, doing every single home game, going to bed for 2 hours. So I would drive from Newark to Philadelphia, do the Sixers home game, go home for like 2 hours sleep, wake up at 4 a.m., drive back to Philadelphia to do this Fox 29 morning show. And I was like, I didn't care how tired I was. I needed to do it. I needed all the experience. I wanted all of it. So I did that for like 2 semesters, for the whole year, obviously. And then when that was over, I had enough from my Fox 29 tape, because I wanted my tape to say Fox 29. I loved the UD. I got so much from Karabjanian's class, but I wanted my reel to be Fox 29. So I got my reel together, sent it out. My path was a little different, because then I went to Indiana for 5 months, hated it there, quit, moved to Florida. And that was really where I actually started working as a reporter. I was there for 2 years. I saw an opening. Molly from the Sixers sideline reporter got fired. I'm like, boom, I want to be a sports reporter. That's where I'm going. I went through all of my emails, all of my contacts, found the information from the people that I met when I worked with the Sixers, emailed them, and I was in Philadelphia 2 weeks later for a job working as a sideline reporter for the Sixers. Dream job, didn't get it, which is fine. Then I landed up here. But my point is to get in the field, you have to like talk to people, and you have to save their information. It is so important, because if I didn't save the information from the person from the Sixers, I would have never gotten that job opportunity or that job interview. From that interview, I now have the email of the guy who runs NBC Sports in Philadelphia. So if there's ever another job opening, I can email him, ask him, hey, do you have any openings? Take me, here's my reel, whatever it is, I have it. So I feel like it is so important to get that internship and start early. I wish I started when I was, a sophomore at UD, and then just spent like so much time doing like my part, like my days off, like working as an intern, whether it's, in a newsroom or a sports room, because I didn't really know what I wanted to do, news or sports. or, or go to, work, right, go, whatever you want to do. Just, it's so important that you get your foot in the door, early, and then you hold on to every single card that from people that you meet, because I feel like this business really is about who you know. I got this job in Baltimore because I met a reporter randomly at a bar for one of my friends' going away party, and he was only in town for 2 days. He worked in Baltimore. There was an opening 3 months later. He called me. Here I am. So it's been great, but that's like the most important thing is like you have to use LinkedIn. Go on LinkedIn and like type in news director and just see who comes up and be like, great, email them. If they have the option, email them your resume, your reel, whatever it is, do it and get out there and get seen and start early, because, like it's really tough sometimes to get a job. Like I have a lot of friends who are still looking for jobs, and they find themselves like re-signing in their last station because they can't find somewhere else to go, and they should have started early. So that would be my advice, is just get your foot out there, put yourself out there. I know sometimes it can be really awkward and those email exchanges aren't great and rejection sucks, but you know what? You might get something good out of it. So do it. That would be my advice.
Yeah. And be persistent.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would say too. Until you get a no. Every answer.
You will get some no's, but that's okay. I'll be quick. So I was at UD, did the review, WVUD, a lot of the same stuff that all of you are involved in now. I got an internship before my senior year with the News Journal. I was general assignment reporter, did all sorts of different stories for 2 months. And then I stayed on in the fall. I worked once a week on Friday nights for high school football. And then I continued to do a couple like freelance type assignments during my senior year, just whenever there was a extra story that needed to be covered, especially if it was in the Newark area. And then in February of my senior year, I came in for to talk about a story, kind of flesh out what it was going to be. It was part of this USA Today project, so it's kind of didn't have a lot of relevance here, but we figured it out. And at that point, they told me, the editors that I work with now, had a job that wasn't posted yet. So kind of like what Kelsey said, it's a lot about who you know. It wasn't something that I just kind of blindly sent an application into. They said, we're going to have a couple new positions this spring, and we'd like you to come on as a news reporter. Now, I had done mostly sports at UD, but it was a good opportunity to kind of get my feet wet at a solid paper with people that I was comfortable working with. They knew my skill set and kind of where I needed to grow and what I wanted to do. And I felt comfortable with them and with the area. So I took it. I started in April of my senior year, and that's what I've been doing since. I think the advice that's been said about being persistent in getting jobs and internships is definitely spot on. It's definitely not easy, but there are opportunities out there.
Brendan, John wanted to know how the editing process at Delawareonline is different than the review, if at all, like what some of the similarities and differences are.
Sure. I mean, the biggest difference is everything moves way faster. A lot of times I'm writing a story that gets eyes on it by maybe 2 people, sometimes 1 person, and in certain situations, nobody. So you have to be able to write clean. And I kind of know, like, if this is a story that we just need to get out and we're not going to kind of edit it all the way down, that I'll kind of play safe. Like if there's something that I'm 95% sure on, but I can't get it to 100%, I'm going to wait until the second or third version of that story, or wait until I can have a full conversation about it with an editor. And on the other hand, though, when I know my editor is going to look at it and kind of go through it with me, I'll take some more chances in the way that I write, in the kind of source material I may or may not use. And then that allow us to at least know kind of what's there, and then can kind of strip and par back from there. So on certain stories, the more fleshed out, fuller stories where we're taking a little bit more time, I work with one editor specifically. We have 3 or 4 editors that kind of work with different reporters in our staff. So I'll work with them and then it gets sent after we're done with it to what's called the production desk, and they kind of finalize some of the web elements to it and get it ready for the print edition. So that would be kind of the two eyes there. But in a lot of breaking news situations, it's getting looked at by one person, maybe just me posting it, and then getting looked at by somebody later. So that editing process, it's much quicker, much faster. It's on me to have stuff like basic grammar and all of that. All that stuff is like out of the question. That has to be good by me. Other people will pick up on it, but I'm going to get chewed out if I leave in misspelled words and things like that. I have to proofread it myself.
Yeah, Tom and Kelsey, could you maybe talk about the editing process for like TV and radio as well, and maybe what the script review process is like?
Yeah, I mean, on
Tom, you're muted.
I need to unmute myself. Sorry about that. It happens at least once every time. I mean, for us, a lot of it is, I mean, we're a pretty small outfit, so a lot of the editing goes through me. And it's pretty quick, what I would call kind of triage editing. It's like, okay, like we've got a story we're trying to get done this afternoon to get on our part of all things considered during the 4 to 6 p.m. hour. So I do rely, much like Brandon was saying, kind of breaking news situations with the news journal. I'm relying on the reporters to like really, proofread their own stuff, button up all this as much as they can, so that I can kind of get something, look at it, and I would prefer to spend more of my time looking at the more nuanced stuff. Hey, well, what about this? Or is there a reason? Do we know this that's not in here? Like try to kind of get at some of the detail type of things that I feel the story may or may not need. It's a little bit different process for our longer feature stories. There's a little bit more of an editorial process over the course of days where you can send me the initial scripts. I'll come back with okay, here's some quick structural things I think need to be improved, and then here's some kind of details, facts, content pieces I think need to be improved, and then have the reporter work on it, send it back to me. So I look at it, I always say to people, it's kind of like there's like two tracks for us. There's kind of like long form reporting track, which is a little bit more like a traditional editing process, I think almost anywhere, like, whether it be print or, broadcast. And then there's kind of like that kind of, immediate track. We're trying to get stories on ASAP. That's a little bit more, like I said, I kind of call it triage editing. And it really just depends on what we're trying to get from the final product and what the timetables and restrictions are.
For us, it's totally different because I have to like write a script, maybe not totally different, but for me, I have to write a script that makes it sound super conversational. So I'll type up my script and it usually starts off with something kind of catchy to make people, keep wanting to listen, but I'll type it up. I'll send it to like 4 people because I want them to read it and make sure that because sometimes I feel like, like when you talk, like it makes sense to you, but it might not make sense to everybody else. And I have made like a mistake in the past where I call a city like a quiet city, and I had no idea because I'm new to the town that this is actually like the worst city in Baltimore. So I'm like, great. So I always like send my stuff out, make sure that my producer, my editor, everyone can read it, make sure that it's clear and I make sense, and then send it back so I can track it correctly. So for us, it's just because then we have a web team that is amazing, and then we'll take our script and completely reword it into like full sentences, because sometimes my scripts are not full sentences. So
okay, so the next question I have, I'm just going to go ahead and let Lex explain this one about the review and OCM. So Lex, you can go ahead on that one.
Thanks. So I'm Alexis Carroll. I'm the managing news editor at the Review currently. And essentially what's been going on is that for about 2 months now, or going on 3 now, the Office of Communications and Marketing has just completely stopped contacting anybody at the Review. They won't reply to anyone. They won't contact us. They wouldn't even talk to the executive editor or editor-in-chief. So I was just wondering if you have any suggestions for working around, it's not a PR team, but I'm calling it a PR team because it's kind of like who we have to go through to actually like get sources and information from people. So any strategies for getting right to sources such as administration that usually would not be so inclined to reply to a student reporter or even an editor of that sort. And I just wanted to say that it's just been like, we've been doing well, I would say, but we're going off of like website announcements and general emails and stuff. And it would be really nice to actually access these sources so that our readers actually have content that's not just coming from, insert news source here. So I was just wondering if you had any suggestions for that.
Well, I will jump in and say this. I mean, I am familiar with and I see Brandon's laughing because I'm sure he knows this drill pretty well. I mean, I understand your pain, and I understand it's hard I understand it's gonna be hard for me to give you advice because you're in a very different situation than we are. A lot of times when we deal with universities, and I'm not just talking about the University of Delaware, I have had reporters who have over time, we talked about this earlier, kind of built rapport with people that they could then call directly. And we've done that. We've sometimes just kind of circumvented the process to get what we need. I don't know that I would recommend that for you because I think there's more peril for you in doing that than there is for us. But I feel sometimes a lot of what you have to do in building stories over time, particularly in our realm professionally, is try to find ways to get comfortable with sources where they will talk to you without necessarily having to go through PR sources or PIOs, at least initially. Here even in the state of Delaware, there's some agencies that are really good and are really helpful and connect you with people reasonably well. And there are ones that I swear I bang my head against the wall because I don't understand. Their process makes no sense, even if you're trying to be super controlling of the message. And so, like I said, sometimes there is a certain ask permission later piece of it. But like I said, I do understand where the relationship you have with the university is a little bit different. It's a little bit different for us as an outside entity to do those things occasionally when we feel it's necessary. And I will say, I often tell my reporters, like, be smart with those bullets. Like if you have, use those things when you really need the story. Don't make it your go-to move, because then at a certain point you kind of get blowback on it, both from sources and from agencies and groups. But to a certain extent, sometimes you have to be able to go to use your sources and build those sources. And again, I know it's harder for you guys because you're not necessarily. I mean, I've been around Delaware for a really long time, and so I have built up some relative goodwill, and some maybe some people are more willing to talk to me because they know who I am a little bit more. And that's hard when you're working in a college setting where you have a finite time that you're working at the Review, and only so much time to kind of build that group of contacts you can rely on. So I guess the short answer, and that's a really long answer to the question. I apologize for that. I would say I'm not sure there's a whole lot you can do, particularly with the universities. If and when you talk about the administrative piece, like administration people aren't going to talk to you like that. I mean, what I'm usually talking to is like if I need to get to professors about something or things like that. There's a lot of workarounds. A lot of times when we deal with state agencies, if it's someone we use as a source regularly, we can get around it. All I can say is keep pressing, because I do think the one thing I have not liked about this pandemic is that there's a lot more of this kind of like, well, just send us your questions ahead of time. We'll email you your answers. And I would advise everyone to push back on that as hard as you possibly can. Sometimes you just got to do what you got to do to get a story done. But when it comes to giving questions ahead of time or settling for emailed answers, you've just got to push back as much as you can, because I think that this pandemic has kind of given people some PR and PIOs the feeling that they can do that with much more reckless abandon, and I'm really not happy about that.
I agree with a lot that was mentioned. One of my favorite, or I don't know if favorite's the right word, but one of the things that you can do that might not help now, but you can think about in the future is like, a lot of times you want to do the story, you're still going to do it, like putting fairly high in the story. So-and-so by name, like whoever it is, did not reply for our multiple requests for comment. And you have to make sure if you're going to do that, that you exhausted every, available means to get in touch with them. But that kind of puts some heat on them if whatever else you have in the story doesn't look good, or they feel like the story, then maybe they come back to you and you say, well, that's why I was reaching out all of that time. I wanted to hear your side of the story. I'm not out to get you, but I want to present, what the story is here. That might not necessarily help right now. They might not care that much right now that they don't look great in the review just because the eyeballs aren't there, and it might not even be the case when the news journal does it. But when the Washington Post puts that in there, like they're going to get on the phone because the people above them are going to say, what the hell is going on? Like, why does it say that we didn't answer them? Because sometimes they're not even going to the people that you're asking them for. They're just kind of making the determination that, yeah, we're not going to talk to them. And kind of along with what was said, you can circumvent them. You have to kind of weigh based on the story and who the source is, whether or not that's going to be effective and whether or not that's going to be worth it. But a lot of times it can be. And the other thing I'd say is when you do get a chance to talk to an administrator or someone like that, and if they want to kind of come with limits as far as time or topics, if you've really been struggling to get that person, and I think the thinking on this kind of differs between reporters, but I would just take it. And then once I'm in that interview, maybe then disregard what they said about, like, we're only going to stay to talking about this or that, or we're only going to stay to 15 minutes. Like if I get the person talking, they might go to 20, 25 minutes. I'm not going to stop the interview because we have a 15-minute timer on it. They might not even know that whoever set it up for them agreed to these conditions. So if you're presented with that situation, I would take it. If you're presented with email questions, I don't like that. I would at least push phone call. Right now, especially a phone call is probably the best you're going to get in a lot of situations, which you got to take if you can get it. So there's not an easy answer to that. It's a lot of weighing relationships while kind of trying to build them at the same time, and determining like what's going to be worth it for the story that you're trying to pursue, and trying to find ways around it so that your source isn't dictating what stories you're writing or producing. There are some ways to talk about a topic, even if they're not going to give you their thoughts, to get thoughts from other people, to kind of flesh out a picture of what could happen in a certain situation. It doesn't work for every piece, but there are some times where, okay, they're not going to talk to us, but we still kind of want to set the agenda and explore what people are talking about, given this particular set of circumstances.
Okay, so we don't have a whole lot of time left, and I don't want to keep everybody too much longer. Real quickly, if we just want to go through these last two questions, because I don't want to like ignore anyone's question. Joey wants to know, and this could really go for anybody. There are a few people here who maybe only have experience in one medium, and or most of their experience is in print, or most of their experience is in TV. How interchangeable do you think writing skills can be through other types of news like broadcast and radio versus print?
I feel like writing is the most important thing, because that's, you use your writing to write a script. Like I need to make my script good so people want to listen to the story, and then I also have to, make it so that way it goes on the web. I mean, I say that, yes, I do have a web team that does write my script, and I'm so grateful for them, but that's only at this market that I'm at. At my last station, I had to write the script and post it to the web. So I feel like, I wish I paid so much more attention in school when it came to like, I had all the books. I had all the AP writing style books. I forget what class I was in. I think it was with like Lydia Timmons. She gave me like an AP, and I was just like, okay, yeah, thanks. She made me buy the book. I have no idea where the book is in my house, but I wish I paid so much more attention, because I find myself now buying the book on Amazon, trying to like go through and be like, okay, do I say there are over 1,000 cases? There are more than 1,000 cases. Well, there's more than, because you can't go over. And I'm like, God, you know how many times I messed that up when I was writing my last market? All the time. I still make mistakes now with it. So I'm like, I feel like writing is so important. If you can be a good writer, you can be a good storyteller, my opinion.
I would say, I mean, I agree with Kelsey. I mean, good writing is good writing. So if you're a good writer, I mean, you can work in kind of both worlds, but they are very different. I mean, there's you're trying to write a story that's going to fit in, between 45 seconds and a minute 30 tops, like for our newscast, is very different than writing a print piece. So I think if you're a good writer, you can learn that skill, but you do need to, you're going to have to practice at it. And I think vice versa too. I think I found, a lot of radio reporters, when they, or, even TV, radio and TV. I mean, I've worked in both those worlds. I mean, when they've been asked to kind of write a more fleshed out, like print version of something, yeah, they run into the problems that Kelsey mentioned. And I started in radio and TV, and I'll admit, I wrote to talk. And so grammar, when you're just doing a radio newscast, nobody's looking at the words, man. I'm just saying them. So at some point, if you and in this day and age, I think because more people have to straddle both worlds, you really do need to pay attention to like the AP style book and things like that, and learn how to write what would be considered solid print style AP verified type of work. Which, when I was working 20 years ago, I could totally just get away with just not worrying at all. I'll put dashes and dots wherever I want to put them. But it's something you have to work at, because they are very different. And even between radio and TV, I'm sure, and Kelsey can tell you this, I mean, writing to video is very different than writing for radio, where you're trying to create pictures in people's minds. So there's a lot of nuances in between. But I think the biggest point I would say is, if you're a good writer, you can do all of them. You just have to kind of work at it if you've only worked in one realm and want to move to another one.
All right, let's do the last one here, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up, because it's after 2. It's probably a good one to end on also. User wants to know, what do you think the future of news and journalism will be or will look like coming out of the pandemic? Is there maybe an opportunity to bring about some change? And what would those changes be?
Yeah, I think about that often. I think about that because like going through this, and like I'm a weekend anchor. I'm not anchoring right now because they don't want me in the newsroom, because they want to keep just the people in the newsroom like to a minimum. So I sit here and like, that's something I panic about. I'm like, okay, well now they just realized that they don't need me on the weekends because they have someone else who can do it, who's already been in the room Monday through Friday. So I think I have no idea how this is gonna change. Like I really don't. Like I'm like, okay, like I've got I'm doing interviews on Zoom, so I can do them myself now. So I'm sure like at WJZ, we're gonna be probably having MMJs pretty soon, because they're realizing like, hey, we need people who can, record an interview, do an interview, shoot your own thing. That way it's not you and somebody together in one place. It's just you. So it's minimizing the spread. So I'm sure this was a huge wake up call for them. But for journalism moving forward, I don't know, like I wish I knew. And I do, I think about this often, like, okay, are we going to be doing interviews online? Like, is this going to be our new thing, or we're not even going to have to go and meet people in person anymore? But that's kind of what I do. I go out there and I talk to people face to face. So I I can't, yeah, I don't have an answer because I don't know, like it's something that like blows my mind to think about, that like coming out of this, yeah, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm sure something is going to change. I'm no help. Why am I in this? I'm no help.
I would say this. I mean, my biggest concern is the economics of local journalism. That that there's a lot of places that are going to have a hard time rebounding, and this is print, radio, TV, from kind of like the loss of revenue, and that kind of piggybacks on what Kelsey was saying. Is like I think a lot of management folks are going to see like, well, there's maybe we can do more with less, or at least the same with less. And that worries me too, because I think local journalism was already kind of under siege anyway. And the idea that, some places may have to cut staff and never bring them back during this time. Some management might say like, oh, we were able to kind of pull this off with, 5 people instead of 9 or 10. Let's just keep doing that. Is really troubling to me, because I think we need more journalism, not less, and we need more young journalists like yourselves to get into the business and kind of start on that path, because I think it's really important. As I think a number like Brandon and Kelsey both kind of talked about their own careers, how those early years are really defining, and there's really great opportunities for you to learn a lot in those first few years. And I think if we don't give young journalists those chances early on, we're not going to have seasoned veteran journalists to do the really heavy lifting in the future. So that's my biggest concern is can we continue to make journalism viable at the local level? I mean, the Washington Posts and the New York Times and those they're going to be just fine. It's the stuff down at this level, our level in Delaware, and even at Kelsey's level, a larger city, but you got to have those local journalists there working and covering city hall and state legislatures. That the Washington Post isn't going to do that, for Delaware or Maryland or Iowa. So that's my biggest concern, and I'm hoping people see the value of what we're doing as journalists during this time and understand it's worth supporting. And when I say worth supporting, I mean watching the TV station and subscribing to the newspaper and donating to our fund drive. I mean, like, if you care about journalism, vote with your wallet. So that's, I think that's that's the thing that keeps me up at night most of what's going on now.
I'd also say like the whole fake news thing is like amplified right now. I feel like more than ever, because you go on Facebook, you go on Instagram. Like I have people on Instagram who are like this, and then the whole pandemic thing that was on YouTube that I never saw, but I keep reading about it. And like everyone's just posting like, this is for the government's doing this. Like, oh, just go drink papaya juice and you'll be fine. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't think you're right, but I don't think like, so it's weird how like now it's just like, maybe people have their thoughts about Fox News and CNN and whatever, but then I feel like sometimes that trickles down to local news, and it's like I'm not sitting here talking about whatever they're talking about. I'm doing something totally different. But I don't know, like that kind of worries me too, to see how much people are talking about like fake news, and I'm curious to see how much people, if they don't trust local news, or if they don't trust the news after this, or if they do, or would they still look to the news for their information? I don't know. Or if they look to YouTube, like, I don't know what's going to happen. It's weird. Sorry, Brandon, I just totally cut you off.
No, you're good. I hung back because I have no idea how to answer this question. It's the toughest one yet. I wish I had the answer. I think undoubtedly it'll look different. I think in the short term, some of the changes that Kelsey talked about as far as not meeting with people in person and doing things over Zoom like we are now, I think that's definitely going to be around for a while. But to like the macro picture, like our newspaper has not had the type of demand that it has currently, probably forever, certainly since I started here. one of the benefits online that everybody will talk about is your reach can expand. And we've certainly seen that. People are coming to us wanting information about this, yet at the same time, we're in quite possibly the worst financial shape. So your business has its highest demand ever, and is struggling economically. So the answer to how you solve that is not easy at all. I don't know if it comes from certainly somebody at my level. I try to just stay focused on producing news that is important, that people need to get in their hands, as well as things of interest that maybe go toward the more entertaining side, but certainly have some news value as well. So I'm looking for those stories now, and I certainly fear for what part of the future could hold, but I try to stay as hopeful as I can. But it's certainly tough.
Does anyone else have any last things that they want to add? If not, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up because it's after 2. I don't want to keep anybody too long. But Brandon and Kelsey and Tom, thank you very much for coming to talk with all of us today. And thank you everyone who came to listen and ask questions. We did make a recording of the video, so we'll be able to send it to the people who could not join today. But yeah, you guys are free to leave the meeting, I guess. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. If anyone ever wants to reach out for anything else, let me know.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Tom, man.
Do you want me to? I can get his. Did you want to ask him something?
I was just gonna ask him about if Delaware Public